morning, church family, and welcome back to another one of our online Sundays. You've just heard the declaration that says, "This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." Now that comes from Psalm 118, and we'll read a little bit more of that psalm in just a few moments. Before we get there, just a reminder that tonight we'll be hearing from Giovanna, who will be sharing of her mission experiences in Brazil and in Guinea-Bissau. Then the following Sunday, we have some baptisms down here at the church. On the 6th of September, the evening of the 6th of September, we have not a church meeting. It's an opportunity for us to gather, to pray, to talk, and to look at the opportunities that lie before us as a church. Don't forget, on the 10th of September, our young people are doing a fundraiser car wash. So bring your dirty car down to church on Sunday, the 10th of September, and give the young people some money, and they'll be happy to wash your car for you. And lastly, a reminder that camp registrations are still open now. There's been a number of registrations which has come in, which is great, which means there's going to be a whole lot of people up at camp this year. And so if you have not already registered, let me encourage you to do so. Registrations will be open for another 2.5 weeks before they close off and we make our final preparations for camp, which runs between the 6th and the 8th of October. But as I mentioned earlier, here's that text, Psalm 118. It says this: "I will praise you, for you have answered me and have become my salvation. The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." Now, we don't know what the psalmist had experienced to pen these words, but we know these words are true of Jesus, that he became the cornerstone, that he was the stone that initially was rejected. But we know that because of Jesus, we can confidently declare that this is the day that the Lord has made, that we will rejoice and be glad in it. And now here's a song that reminds us of the faithfulness and the goodness of God to us that is stretched from forever and to forever. So let's listen to that song together.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. I have lived in the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
The road to Emmaus. Now behold, two of them were travelling the same day to a village called Emmaus, which was 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they talked together of all these things which had happened. So it was, while they conversed and reasoned, that Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were restrained, so that they did not know him. And he said to them, "What kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are sad?" Then the one whose name was Cleopas answered and said to him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem? And have you not known the things which happened there in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" So they said to him, "The things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we were hoping it was he who was going to redeem Israel. Indeed, besides all this, today is the 3rd day since these things happened. Yes, and certain women of our company who arrived at the tomb early astonished us. When they did not find his body, they came saying that they also had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. And certain of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it, just as the women had said. But him they did not see." Then he said to them, "O foolish ones, and slow in heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken, ought not the Christ to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. Then they drew near to the village where they were going, and he indicated that he would have gone further. But they constrained him, saying, "Abide with us, for it is towards evening, and the day is far spent." And he went in to stay with them. Now it came to pass, as he sat at the table with them, that he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they knew him, and he vanished from their sight. And they said to one another, "Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us on the road, and while he opened the scriptures to us?" So they rose that very hour and returned to Jerusalem, and found the 11 and those who were with them gathered together, saying, "The Lord is risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." And they told about these things that had happened on the road, and how he was known to them in the breaking of bread.
Come dine with me. About 17 years ago, when we had lived in New Zealand for a couple of years, we decided to go to Paihia for a few nights as a break. We still didn't know many people here in Torbay, so imagine my surprise when I saw someone I knew up in Paihia. we both said hi and wasn't the weather great and walked on. Keith asked me who she was, and I didn't have a clue. I knew her, but what her name was and where I knew her from was a complete mystery. It was only some weeks later when I went into the chiropractor's for my session and I saw the receptionist that I remembered who she was. Because she wasn't in the setting in which I knew her, I could not think who she was. So we all have times when we encounter someone and we don't recognise them or remember how we know them. Over the last weeks, we have looked at a variety of meals that Jesus has shared with different people. There have been lavish feasts, small informal gatherings, and even a miraculous meal served to thousands. Today, the meal is a very small part of the account, but what happened during the meal was what was significant. This is one of the few passages that records the time between the resurrection and the ascension. The account tells of a journey from Jerusalem to Emmaus. Now, this is a fair distance, about 60 stadia, which is roughly 12 kilometres. So it would be a full day's walk. Cleopas and another disciple are making the walk to Emmaus. Cleopas was a disciple, probably one of the 72 who were called later. So much has happened over the last weeks. They had such high hopes, having seen all the miracles and heard all the teachings. And then it came to an end when Jesus was crucified. Some had begun to return to their old lives, probably seeing no reason to remain together as a group, now that their leader was no longer with them. To them, it would seem all their hopes and dreams that they'd shared over the 3 years of Jesus' ministry, all the miracles and all the healings, would have seemed a distant memory now. Remember, as Jews, they'd been waiting many years for the promised Messiah, and they believed he had now come. But this was not the ending that they expected. They thought Jesus was going to change their world for the better, and now it seems like nothing has changed at all. They've plunged from the heights of expectation to the depths of despair. They walk along the road talking together. For most of the 3 years, they had put their normal lives on hold to follow and to serve Jesus. And now all that sacrifice, and they have nothing. They would have experienced so many emotions: sadness, frustration, despair. We know that when we have expectations and they are not met, we know how that feels. They were depressed and disheartened. Their world turned upside down, and they had been left with an uncertain future. Now, this is an emotion that many felt in the COVID crisis, when our world was turned upside down, and we had no idea what the future would hold and what our new normal would look like. For them, they've gone from having very busy lives supporting the work of Jesus, and now it's all come crashing down. They have nothing, and Jerusalem is not even their home. They are in this deep and solemn discussion, trying to work out where it had all gone wrong. And as they walked, Jesus walks alongside them. It would be common on a journey because it was much safer to travel as a group of people. As a group, you were less likely to be robbed. Also, it was company as you walked the road, someone to talk to. Jesus asks them, why are they sad? At this point, they would have looked at him as he spoke, but Scripture says their eyes were restrained because they did not recognize who he was. Cleopas asks him, how could he not know all the things that had happened? And it had all happened under the public eye. Jesus had ridden triumphantly into Jerusalem, and all the crowds had gone wild. Then, at the peak of his popularity, he was arrested, tried, and put to death. A very public death where all could see. Then on the third day, there was the excitement of the resurrection, and he began to appear to people. This would have been very hot news, and so Cleopas would have been astonished that this fellow traveller didn't know what had occurred. Surely everyone knew what had been happening. On the journey to Jerusalem, Jesus lets them share their anxieties and pain. He lets them grieve and mourn, and he listens to them as they pour out their doubts, and he used scriptures so that they could understand. Jesus then begins to speak to them about himself. He starts right back at Moses and the prophets and speaks of the things that were to come and how Jesus has been the fulfillment of those things. He was the promised Messiah spoken of through the pages of the Old Testament. During the journey, Jesus patiently guides them from hopelessness to celebration. When you're experiencing your own dark journey, you need to remember that Jesus walks with you as a friend on that journey. You are not alone. As they approach the village where they're staying, Jesus made to continue his journey, but they urge him strongly, probably even take hold of his arm and guide him into their home. They say, "Stay with us, for it is almost evening and the day is nearly over." They would prefer him to stay with them rather than continue a journey on his own. They had enjoyed the conversation on the road, and they probably wanted that to continue too. I guess this would have been a simple meal. After all, they'd been away from home and been walking all day. It would have been no grand feast, but a simple meal made from what was at hand. The two disciples showed their openness and caring to an unknown stranger, who is Jesus, by inviting him to stay with them and have a meal and share some companionship. This could have come from the time when, as followers of Jesus, they'd learned a different way of living. As followers of Jesus, we do things others would not necessarily do. And this is, for us, this is how we make a difference, by praying, worshipping, being generous with our money and sharing what we have with those who do not. It's only when they broke the bread together that they realised who it was with them. They'd been in darkness, but now they see the light. This is like our Christian walk. The Bible says when we become a Christian, we move from a kingdom of darkness into a kingdom of light. And just as these two had no idea whom it was they were entertaining, they suddenly could, as everything was revealed. It says, their eyes were opened and they recognized him, just as ours were at that moment we chose to believe. This revelation occurred during the meal, a light bulb moment. Just like me when I saw the receptionist in the clinic, everything became clear. And then Jesus disappears supernaturally. Their enthusiasm floods their whole being when the two had encountered the risen Christ during the meal. They were so eager to share this news back with their brothers in Jerusalem that they rose and immediately began the long walk back. Now, this would have been at night time, and one never travelled at night because of the dangers, but nothing was going to stop them getting there to tell the others the good news of what they'd seen and experienced. What a different journey back. Yes, it is at night, and the road would have been deserted, but their steps would have a lightness to them that they didn't have on the previous journey. They had no fear for their personal safety. All they wanted to do was be with their fellow disciples and tell them that they too had seen Jesus. They wanted to share their good news. And this is something we can relate to as we share with others. What a difference knowing Jesus has made to our lives. It is such good news, far too good to keep to ourselves. Are we sometimes like the disciples on the road to Emmaus? Are we not able to recognise Jesus when he tries to make us aware of his presence in our lives? For centuries, the Jews looked for the promised Messiah. They eagerly awaited his coming. And yet for many, when he did, their eyes were blinded, just like the two disciples. We know that Jesus is coming back again, so we need to keep our spiritual eyes open, and we will be ready and prepared. Then, just as these two people's lives were transformed from hopelessness to celebration, we too will experience that. Now we're living a more normal life. We do not need to go back to the same old as before, but we can embrace something new, a life with Jesus firmly at the centre, and a celebration of what he has safely led us through. Don't be blind to the Jesus who walks beside you.
Savior, I come, quiet my soul. Remember, redemption's here, where your blood was spilled for my ransom. Everything I once held dear, I count it all as lost. Lead me to